There has been some news this week, two bits of it that I want to point your attention to, and it's kind of been buried by the NFL draft, and there's been a lot of stuff going on. Did you know, for example, that they released the college football playoff scheduling format, the expanded playoff? This right here is the last year that we're having a 14 playoff. I'm just pausing so you can cheer. Oh, who are these sick people? I kid. And so then we're going to the expanded 12-team format. Now, as you look on the screen, or if you're listening on podcasts, let me tell you, here's what came out. The first round games will be played on campus, and it'll be Friday and Saturday, December 20th and 21st. Or, as I would call it, December 20th and the first day of meteorological winter. Then the second round games, nope, not on campus. They're going to be at bowl sites on New Year's Day. Then the third round, because yes, we're talking third and fourth rounds now in college football playoff lore, or college football playoff conversation. Those will be Thursday or Friday, January 9th or 10th. That's when the title game normally would have been played. And then the championship game will be played Saturday, January 20th. So we started on the 20th and we ended on the 20th. It's a solid month of playoff. Oh, by the way, we're going to mix in Christmas and New Year's and whatnot in there as well. The date of the fourth game is TBD. Anyway, so this obviously fluctuates year to year. This is just the first year, and that's the way it's going to work out. Okay, that's the schedule. That was just news that you may or may not have seen. But also, what I want to do tonight, just for a couple of minutes, is I want to remind you of something. Now, I want to remind you of the process that goes into selecting the teams. And then I want to remind you, for those who remember how adamantly I was against expansion, remember there were two key reasons. One of them was just out of principle, and that was, I don't think we need it. I would love to crystallize the regular season, and I would love to maximize the importance of every game. And I know the counter arguments to that. We're not getting into that. So that was one reason. The other reason was I didn't like the devil in the details when it came to what the selection process was going to be. And for those of you who have forgotten, the selection process is they're taking 6 at-large teams, but they're also taking the 6 highest-ranked conference champions. 6. They're taking half a dozen of the highest-ranked conference champions. That virtually assures that every Power 5 conference champ is going to the playoff every year. Now, there are some folks out there who think that's a good thing. I think auto bids are a joke in any format in college football. Now, college basketball, I'm for it all day. Totally different sport, apples to bowling balls. But I've been against this. You guys know, I've talked about this for a long time. Well, I want to ask you, do you see where this is headed? And I want to remind you of something. Earlier in the show, we talked about the gulf when it comes to NFL draft numbers between the SEC and the Big Ten and everyone else. We have seen in media rights deals the gulf that will continue to exist and expand between the SEC, the Big Ten, and everyone else. Realignment matters a lot too, guys. You can't just think about how you define the future of college football by what it's been, because the future of college football is going to look a whole lot different. And that's why I really question whether we should continue to even use the moniker Power 5. Some folks have already stopped using it. Power 5 indicates that there are 5 conferences out there that are at least roughly similar. Certainly there's a hierarchy, but they're roughly similar. I don't think we're really headed towards a world where that exists anymore. And I want to pay close attention to the Pac-12 for a second. USC's out there right now. UCLA's out there right now. They will not be out there. They are about to go to the Big Ten. And that brings me to an article by, I think it was Seth Davis, who writes for The Athletic. And he was interviewing the San Diego State athletic director earlier this week. And there was a quote from the San Diego State athletic director, John David Wicker, and it's on your screen now if you're watching on YouTube. Quote, "One or the other is going to happen. We're excited for the opportunity, and we've done a lot of work to prepare for that." Now, that's an out-of-context quote. You want me to tell you what he's talking about? He's talking about San Diego State either going to the Pac-12 or the Big 12, and it's most likely going to be the Pac-12. Do you see where I'm going with this? Do you see where the Pac-12 is going with this? And do you see where the College Football Playoff Committee, and when I say committee, I mean powers that be, have been going with this for a long time? The Pac-12 is losing major players like USC. They are backfilling those spots. An already weak conference is backfilling the departure of some of the very few power players that were out there with G5 also ran programs and still expecting to be taken seriously on the national stage. This is where the concept of the 6 conference champ auto bid process becomes a joke to me. Always has been a joke, but it's really a joke now. The entire concept of auto bids for conference champs only makes sense in a sport where they're at least somewhat within the same competitive realm. The Pac-12 is losing teams like USC, and they're going to backfill it with teams like San Diego State, and it's already a weakened conference. NFL draft numbers bear that out. College football playoff numbers bear that out. Media rights deal numbers bear that out. A weakened conference is only going to get weaker in the coming years, and that's without even knowing what Washington or Oregon are going to do. That's without even knowing what those four corner schools are going to do. That's without even knowing what the media rights deal is going to be. And you're going to tell me, well, yeah, but they should still get a guaranteed spot in the playoff. Anyone of sound mind knows how misdirected this is, because anyone of sound mind who watches this sport knows any conference champ worth their salt is already ranked in the top 12. So anybody who's actually worth being in the playoff is already going to be ranked high enough to be in the playoff. They didn't go for that. They wouldn't sign off on that. They would only sign off on the deal if there was a carve-out. Sounds a lot like Washington, doesn't it? Not the Huskies, the one on the other coast. Sounds a lot like politics in the sense that they had to get a special carve-out for something that they otherwise were not going to earn in merit. That's where the college football playoff's headed. It's going to be a tournament of inclusion for the sake of inclusion. This is always the direction it was going. It's not a tournament for excellence. It's not a tournament based solely on merit. And there are still going to be some who yell at me, well, yeah, but what better way to decide who should be in than taking teams that win their conference? How can you have a legitimate playoff if you don't include conference champs? My counter to that is, how can you look at all conference champs as being legitimately equal or close to equal? How can you look at a conference like the SEC or the Big Ten, and in the future, look at a conference that's losing USCs and replacing them with San Diego States and say, the team that comes from over there and the team that comes from down here or up here, yeah, they're roughly similar to me. No, they're not. No, they're not. But this is the format that they snuck in on you, or maybe they didn't sneak it in on you. Maybe some of you support this. I think it's trash. I've always thought it was trash. You always would have gotten pushback from me on expanding the playoff because of principle, but if you would have given me an expanded playoff with just the top 12 regardless, at least I would have said, well, that's a fair way to format it, because conference champions, if they're worth anything, they're going to be ranked in the top 12 because the rankings process itself would still have valued conference champions. I want you to remember this now. When they come out with that final ranking, right before they do the selection process, the one that comes out after the conference championship games have been played, their own criteria, the committee's own criteria stipulates that they give preference to conference champs. So you would have not only had your regular season records merit to go on, but if you won that conference title game, you would have been vaulted even higher than that additional win otherwise normally would have vaulted you. And we're going to live in a world where even if that didn't get you high enough, you're still going to get in anyway. Why? Because you're a conference champ, one of 6 highest ranked conference champs. Pathetic, predictably pathetic, but that's where we're headed. And that's what's best for the sport, I'm told.